Welcome back to Razmafzar TV. I'm really happy to have Bede back on our channel. Hi, Bede. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Yes. Bede, before we started, told me that he is drinking mango juice or something like this.
Mango smoothie, a mixture
Ah, a
of mango,
smoothie.
milk, and plain yogurt.
It's very interesting because when Bede was talking about the price of mango in Australia, then I realized, my God, how much we pay in Germany for mango. We pay a lot.
Yeah, but the thing is, it grows from the top of northern Australia all the way down, even to a bit south of Sydney.
Yes.
So this mango came from my neighbour's tree that is hanging across the fence into my yard.
For
Uh,
us in Germany, such a thing is just unbelievable. It's something like you
yeah,
go on vacation and see stuff like that, you know?
well, it's Sydney's subtropical, and
Yeah.
I mean, I you just get used to what's around you.
Yes,
Um,
of course. Of course. Okay, Pete, we are going to continue our journey, and our journey is on Russian Museum. Yes, last time we talked about Indian arms and armor, and now we move to Japanese arms and armor from beautiful Hermitage Museum.
well,
Again,
that's
we need
nice.
also to say these the whole collection have papers, and again, most of them, or if not all, are presents and gifts. So we need to take
Mhm.
this again into consideration. Okay, so look at these Japanese armor, please, from Hermitage Museum.
That's very nice. This is
Mhm.
yeah, it's very hard to tell, but it looks as though it's small scale Kozane uh armor. It's done in what 14th century style, but it's much later.
Yes.
The the bearskin shoes are a dead giveaway that this is from the days when they the armor design comes from the days when people were riding horses. Uh, because you wouldn't want to walk around in these. They're not really. I've seen patterns for them and how they're put together, and they're not great. The Japanese had a tendency of using rice straw sandals that they were intended to last a certain number of kilometers when you were walking. So therefore, you could say a journey was a three sandal journey because you used up three pairs of sandals. It's a really interesting concept. I noticed the so this armor's got Kabuto, which is a multi-plate dome riveted structure. It's the turned up pieces on the helmet are called fukageashi. They're originally were part of the shikoro, the neck guard, but then they became quite exaggerated. So then there's the shikoro. Then you've got on the shoulders are sode.
Mhm.
The male sleeves on the arms are kote. I am not pronouncing these correctly. I don't speak Japanese. just giving a rough idea. Then you've got the do, which is the cuirass part, the body. Then below that you have the kuzazuri, the skirts of scale. You notice the very long lacing. That's because that's where the sash is wrapped around,
Yeah.
and it's quite thick. It's enough to be armor in itself, but it does mean that it gives you a lot of flexibility in the waist because this sits up high like a cha'ina. It sits up at navel level.
Yes.
Um, then below that, you've got the thigh guards, which are they're put on separately. They go around the waist. Haidate on the calves, the Japanese equivalent of greaves, suneate.
Yeah.
And I cannot remember the name for the bearskin boots. Uh, the kind of fly whiskey thing out of paper is a general's baton to signal to say, "Here I am, go over there." Whatever's the appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a very complete set. It looks really quite high grade. Um, the it's one thing I noticed the other day when I was looking at some helmets online. The one thing the Japanese really went for was a very secure way of attaching the helmet to the head.
Yes.
Partly it's designed to stop people ripping your helmet off
Yeah.
in battle because there was grappling in Japanese battles.
Yes. Yes.
But there are usually three suspension points for the cord, one on either side and one at the back. And the cord starts at the back one, makes a loop, goes through the front ones, tied off, goes under the chin into one,
Yes.
under the chin into the other, and then can be tied up here or they can be tied up there. But
Yes.
you get a kind of chin cup
Yes.
to hold it in place. It's really a very effective way of doing it. After a while, it's fairly comfortable to wear. And bear in mind, they did this with nice silk wrap cords and things like that, so it's even
Yes.
better. Um, what's really interesting is the fact that this armor is set up correctly. Often in museums and sometimes auctions and things like that, you'll find that the sode are on backwards
Yes.
because they have metal pieces on them that are used to tie them to a bow on the back called agemaki.
Yeah.
And uh, the metal pieces look really attractive, so that often they're turned around.
Yes.
So so that the people walking past the case that it's set up in can see them, whereas obviously you can just see a little bit projecting on the left hand side. Uh, they're for the back. Uh, Certainly later armors didn't have Sodo like this. By the uh, Sengoku Jidai period, the Warring States period, they started to get rid of them. They were effectively shields, and they were mainly designed to prevent arrow strike.
Yes.
Um, they were good defense against sword strike here or here
Yes.
because uh, they kind of enveloped the blade. They sucked energy out of it, if you know what I mean. Because they're not massively flexible, but they were flexible. Um, and you see that there's a fair gap
Yes.
from the dough to the chin. Uh, he's wearing, I think, if that's separate, checking his throat, so Nadawa. Um,
Let me see, Beat. We will come back to it. You see that?
oh yeah, that's really nice. Oh, that's interesting, male.
Yes, we will come back to it. I just wanted to show that those areas are not left unprotected. Just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure because some people say, "Oh, it's unprotected." No, it's not,
Yeah,
right?
no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, they wanted the dough to be fairly rigid, but you can't see it because of the color thing. But
Yes.
there's a hard leather or metal piece at the top,
Yes.
and basically, if you bend down, that
Yes.
stops it from hitting you in the throat.
Yes.
European armors had complicated ways to do the same thing. The Japanese, I think, and um, it's a guess on my part. I think that they wanted more maneuverability in the upper arms,
Yes.
and even though the Japanese were big on fighting duels, certainly not in this period so much, but in the Sengoku Jidai, when like all the warlords daimyo were fighting for control of the empire, um, they were more interested in being able to move around. And then when the Portuguese brought handguns, and handguns became popular really fast in Japan, then the whole armor style changed because they realized you can't protect the whole body.
Yeah.
So they concentrated on making really strong
Yes.
uh, breastplates and backplates. Shoulders were, less armor. They were well protected from sword blows,
Yes.
not as well protected from spear thrusts.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, and there's pieces under the armor that you can't see. There's like a little vest sometimes that has
Yes.
little plates in hexagonal plates. So there's a lot going on in the Japanese armor. It's not just the things that are sitting on top.
Yes. Yes. Let me just go and then can go in detail. Look
Mhm.
at the shoulder protection.
Yeah. See how big they are?
Yeah.
They've got like rigid boards at the top to keep them flat like that, but they
Yes.
still will flex like that, but they won't flex that way.
Maybe I
Not.
just say something, for example, if you go to Kenjutsu or to
Mhm.
fighting arts like Katori, Tanshin Shoden Katori Shinto Ryo, and many of Japanese, which we have them, schools which survived, you see that they have a very, very extended way they bring their shoulder in and then they thrust, or
Mm.
these, which we don't have it in
Yeah,
Kendo, which is very straight.
yeah.
No, anyone who does kenjutsu knows, like Tanshin Shoden Katori Shinto Ryo, that this shoulder protection works like a shield for you, actively like a
Mm.
shield. And that's, many
Mm.
people say, oh, Japanese didn't have a shield. My God, these are two shields. If you know how
Yeah.
kenjutsu works,
Oh
that's,
yeah,
because,
and
people
that
do,
weak spot, yeah, that
because
weak spot
people do
under the armor
kendo.
there.
Yes, because people do
Yeah.
kendo, which we have this trait, because kendo is a nice game, right? To score very
Mm.
fast. So they don't do stuff like that. So, guys, Japanese, don't say Japanese never ever invented a shield. These
Mm.
two extended are actually shields. So if you do kenjutsu, one of the first things they teach you is using this shoulder protection coating. Excuse me, go ahead, please. I just wanted to mention it.
No, no, I completely agree with you. It's similar with the Chinese and Mongol shoulder armor too. It's clearly bigger than it needs to be, and the reason that it's bigger than it needs to be because it fulfills this role as well.
Yes,
Um, the Japanese used what Europeans would call pavise style shields quite a lot,
yes,
particularly after the introduction of gunpowder weapons.
yes.
Um, there are illustrations and surviving examples of small rectangular shields, but they were very uncommon because the Japanese, like a tachi, the sword that's worn with this type of armor, suspended edge down from the belt, uh, was usually used one-handed, but it had a handle long enough to be used two-handed if you wanted to. Um, so therefore, they actually did have a free hand if they were just fighting with a sword. So they could have held a shield, but generally speaking, it wasn't thought necessary. And why carry something extra when you've got this?
Yes.
You can see there the bands of metalwork that go to the back, partway up
Let me
shoulder
show it,
guards.
please. Let me show it. This one, you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, and you see there's a ring right at the back,
Yes.
and that ties on to. There's a ring on the back of the armor on the back plate of the armor, and from that is a cord tied into a cruciform knot. So it has a loop here, and two dangly bits.
Yes.
And those loops are tied with a special cord to those rings to stop the shoulders from going forward and blocking you or getting in your
Yes.
way.
Yes.
And when you raise your arms, say for instance you were shooting a bow in the Japanese style, when you raise your arms, the shoulder guards go to the back out of the way. It's really sophisticated, and it makes you wonder whether that high um, draw in the Japanese was actually designed originally to make the armor
Beat,
clear
it is a
itself.
very important concept. Could you please explain to our viewers again how it works? Because I think it's very important to understand the mechanics of
Oh
this
yeah,
and this long draw in Japanese archery, please.
yeah. Well, if you imagine that you're wearing this armor, for instance, and you've got big shoulder guards here, look how far forward they stick. So
Yes.
they're sticking out forward. So
Yes.
if you just shot a bow like this,
Yes.
there's a fair chance that that shoulder guard would sit there and get in the way of the bowstring.
Yes.
But when you start here and then go up and down,
Yes.
which the Japanese drew very long,
Yes.
it physically lifts them out of the way and they form two rectangles on your back.
Yes.
Um, it's a really good design. The position of the agamaki bow on the back of the armor and these rings on the sode all show that it was deliberate. It wasn't accidental. Um, and of course, it also means if you've got your sword up in the shoulder will go out of the way so that your arm is free to move. As you come down, the shoulder falls back into place. So it's fairly dynamic. Obviously, when you're fighting people with spears, there are tricks that a spearman can use to, overcome that to some extent. The other thing that's interesting about these is they have a loose lining on the inside because you see the chainmail sleeves, the kote. Uh, Otherwise, they would scratch the inside of the scales. So they've got this beautiful silk lining on the inside usually.
Yeah.
Um, there's just so many features to these, and luckily for us, the Japanese wrote a lot about why armor was made the way it was.
Yes. Yes.
It's not
Um,
a kind of thing where you have to guess. You can just read a book about it and it'll tell you.
Pete, let's talk about the arm protector, hand protection. Excuse me. This part, I really love it. It to me, it always looks
Yeah,
like a jug of water.
I think it's meant to be a gourd, um, and I think originally some of them actually opened up and they had medicine inside,
Yes.
but I'm not sure about that. You see how they've done the elbow
Yes.
as a kind of little flower with
Yeah.
four pieces around it.
Yes.
The hand, uh, the thumb section is connected by mail to the back of the palm there, and
Yes.
then there's another piece across the fingers there.
Yes.
So it's more like a mitten than it's not individual fingers. Weirdly enough, I almost bought a piece of Japanese foot armor once. You kind of think, oh yeah, that looks like it turns up occasionally. Never saw one again. And the toes are protected in exactly the same way as the hands are, except it's plainer because it's your feet. But you also can see the how the lacing works, how they have a different style of lacing at the bottom. In the bottom row of scales, it has these little cross pattern laces, Hishinui, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the finishing. They didn't just go lacing it the same way and just stop. They had a way of finishing it to make it look nice. You have all these brass pieces that are, riveted on with split pins and whatever to decorate various pieces. You see also that the like little decorative pieces in the sleeves are actually woven into the mail. They're not just applied or riveted through the mail or something like that. They're actually part of the mail structure, like plate and mail would be. And this type, like the with the gourds and all this decoration, that's old. That goes back to the 1100s, and they kept making it. And sometimes there were things there that were just um, meant
Pete,
to be pretty.
look at the mitten, the way it is constructed. Okay, besides the mail structure, but the whole mitten, the plates. You know what it
Yeah.
strongly reminds me of? Do you remember in Archäologisches Museum in Mainz, they have Sicilian mitten?
Yeah. But the Sasanian mittens, yeah, but a lot of the Sasanian ones had individual fingers as well, which is much more like later knightly armor. The mitten is very much like Bazabane's.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, look at the back. Look at the back.
Yeah.
Look how
Oh
similar
yeah,
to
the way that
this.
yeah, the way the metal is raised to kind of
Yes, yes. Look at that.
indicate the
Yeah,
knuckles and everything like
yeah,
that. It's really nicely done. You notice also there's a kind of little hinge in the middle of the thumb,
yeah,
with lacing and mail.
yeah.
That lacing is probably the loop that fits over the thumb. That's the back of it. There's another loop that fits over the middle finger.
This one, you mean?
Yeah. So that's probably the back of that lacing. You can't see it so much. Well, the mitten is completely down. The end of it is folded under. You also notice that the underneath the kusazori, you can see the hidate. The way the scales are attached is entirely different.
Yes.
Like the hidate is done in a scale armor pattern, so they're actually sewn to the backing at the top edge of the scale, and they
This
overlap
one.
downwards.
This one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Whereas the Kozani in well, if it is Kozani, it's very hard to tell because Japanese were really good at making armor that looked as though it was made of small scales when in fact it was made of sheets with holes in them and embossing. And sometimes the sheets are actually flat, but the embossing is done with carved lacquer. So it looks like lots of little scales, but it's a solid steel plate with holes in it. Yeah, there's the complications in Japanese armor construction are amazing. The sleeves, usually in the part in the fold of the elbow, it's there's actually little squares of mail left out to make it open so that you can close your arm really
Yes.
easily. So there's all kinds of things that make
Yes.
this interesting.
We come to
Now,
mail armor, to Japanese mail armor, and this is something interesting. We already talked about it, but let us talk about characteristics of mail, Japanese mail, because it's important if people come from Persian, Indian, European, and now let's talk about characteristics of Japanese mail, please.
yeah, well, it's an interesting structure usually. I think you can see it fairly clearly here. They don't, it's not same size rings all fitting together. It's the horizontal large rings are attached by small vertical small rings.
Yeah,
So that and the way a large ring may be attached, it could be one small ring at the bottom, one small at the top, one small at each side. So it's like a cruciform attachment, but it can be six small rings. So it could be attached in a hexagonal pattern. You also notice at the top of the photograph, you can see those little square holes I mentioned. They're
yeah,
not a mistake. They're to make the armor flexible. The other thing that's interesting is you can see fairly closely in the top left-hand corner how the little metal plates are integrated into the mail.
yeah,
You can
here,
see rings coming from the mail. They've just gilded the rings to make them look better.
yeah,
Now, this mail is rarely riveted. They did make European style mail, but this is rarely riveted. It's made of spring steel and it's hardened so that sometimes the big rings go around twice,
it,
so that they're like a key ring kind of thing. But other times they're just single rings like these ones, but they're hardened so they don't pull open. Um, I mean, after even after centuries, you rarely see this mail falling apart unless links have rusted all the way through. Um, it's just a different way of making mail.
yes. Just a second, please. What happened? Oh, okay. Uh, Beat, I need to get out. I don't know what happened. Why I'm
Ah,
stuck here. I will look out for it again. I don't know what happened, Beat. I need to search for the document again. It got stuck. Sometimes it happens. Okay, I found it. Yeah, just a second. Okay, now I have it again. So let me just see again if I can share it here again. Do you see it, Pete?
um, it says screen sharing start. Ah, it's back.
Oh, hold on a second, please. I don't know what's going on here with this one. I need to do something about it. Just a second, please. I need to reopen the document because it's stuck. Sometimes it happens, right?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
a second, please. Okay. Yeah, things like that sometimes happen. Um, okay. hmm Yeah. Okay, let's go through it. Ah, okay. Yeah. Ozaki, we were here. Yeah. Okay, I have it.
Mhm.
Okay, let me see. Okay, now you can see it again, right? Am I correct? Okay. We were here.
Um,
Yes.
not quite. Yeah, now it's back.
Okay. So we go to these beautiful shoes. I really love these shoes.
The absolute. I mean, you can see their relationship to some Chinese styles of shoes,
Yes.
but they're totally unique in their thing. The bearskin covering, I mean, it was just a way of showing the kind of strength and masculinity of the samurai.
Tell us
Uh,
about bears in Japan, please.
well, there are still bears in Japan, particularly on Hokkaido. The Ainu people in Hokkaido had a religion that was, um, to some extent, based around bears, but bears were common in Japan. They were hunted out on the main islands because, well, population, but because of the mountains, and forests, bears survive quite a long time. They're like a small black bear.
Okay.
Um, we you don't think of Japan as having a lot of wildlife, but really they do, because it's such mountainous territory. You can build big cities, you can have lots of farmland, but everywhere there are mountains, and in mountains there are wild animals, wild boar, bears. Um, what are they called? Bear dogs or something like that. It's a uh, mustelid or something related to raccoons. Um, you notice the neat way that they tie those crossing straps there.
Yeah.
There's literally dozens of ways of tying knots that are for specific things, um, that are absolutely wonderful. You also see that the shin guards are made of vertical plates that are laced together.
Yes.
Um, they're quite flexible going around, but they're not flexible front to back. Often they have to have articulated pieces up near the knees so that they will bend enough. So what you did when you put your armor on, um, the first thing you put on was your tabi, your socks, and your shoes, your shin armor, the haidate, um, the kote, the sleeves, then the body, the do,
Mm.
and last were the shoulder guards and the helmet, because the shoulder guards weren't permanently attached to the armor. They were taken off when it was stored. And usually armor would pack down into a reasonably sized box, and that would be carried by your servants. Um, so you didn't wear it all the time. If you're on a campaign where you're being attacked all the time, yeah, you wore it all the time.
Mm.
And in Japanese accounts, there are complaints about fighting in wet weather where the lacing gets soggy and heavy and starts to get musty and insects nest in it. And there's lots of written accounts of the difficulties of wearing armor in a fairly wet climate.
Yeah. And the shin protector, as you said, are made of different plates, right?
Yeah. Tsuneate in general, there are various different types. I think in English there is a confusion between splint armor and this kind of armor. Splint armor generally people think of as in terms of strips of metal that don't overlap, whereas
Yes.
these do overlap, so there are no real gaps. They fold from the front round to the back and tie up at the ties are at the back and they come round to the front, so they tie at the top and the bottom. Um, uh, they're the individual plates, like they're not all the same shape plate. They're shaped so that they fit around the calf. In the
Yes.
same way, even though there's lots of separate bits and it's laced together, it reminds me of ancient Greek greaves where they sprung apart and just clipped on your leg. Well, these were tied on, but the plates are meant to shape themselves around the calf of your leg, which is unusual in uh, Asian armor, particularly because they tended to go for things that I'm not going to say one size fits all, but they were much more flexible in the fit. They weren't
Yes.
as close fitting. This has got a good view of the Haidate as well. You can see there are actually 6 rows of holes for lacing. The top row is covered by the overlap of the row above it. Um, but they're not matching holes, they're adjacent holes so that the edges are trapped in the lacing rather than the things firmly connected. The lace goes up over the edge into a hole and then underneath and then up out and again. Uh, it's very economic. You don't have to make as many holes for these big plates because you see from, say, I think it's the armor that Dr. Nicol published from Damascus, where there's a number of plates from an armor.
Yes.
It had lots more holes than these do.
Yes.
And they had to be precisely lined up because one plate had to perfectly fit the plate next to it. Whereas these, if there's a slight error, they still work perfectly well.
Yes.
Not that there were, I mean, these were very
Mm.
precisely made, but it's it just gives you more flexibility. It's like ancient scale armors from the
Yes.
like ancient Egypt
Yes.
and Babylonia and that.
Just to make
The
sure,
advantage.
because I'm sure they're
Mhm.
going to ask it, there is no backing to these shin guard, correct?
Uh, Generally speaking, they're not sewn to a backing. Sometimes the backing is fitted.
Fitted.
Normally, the tabi that you wear under it, the socks, are a little bit padded for this. Though
Exactly.
sometimes they're just ordinary tabi, and so that there's a range of ways of doing it. Um, but sometimes they're just lacquered on the inside, plain lacquer on the inside, and you just wear them against a thin cotton sock. It depends. They weren't really um, into the. See, we really concentrate on padding Under Armour because a lot of people who are using armour today are fighting in full contact sports
It's
and they
sport.
want to be able to fight the next day. Whereas in battle, you just wanted to get away alive. And
Exactly.
the kind of conceptually it was different. You didn't want to be hurt, but you didn't want to be carrying so much padding that
Exactly.
you because
Two
remember
different
it's hot.
concepts. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Two
And
different.
and high date are more often worn on horseback. Even though an armor might have a set of them, they're not that often worn in foot fighting because they slow your legs down.
Yes.
They have two pieces on the underside that do up behind your thigh, so they actually move with your legs. But if you look at a lot of old Japanese paintings, people fighting on foot usually have bare legs. Um, this is just normal. And the reason they do that is because it was hot and sweaty and uncomfortable.
Yes.
And also, not everybody could afford hakama.
Yes.
It was a sign of your wealth. Again, you can see this in the middle photograph. You can see this these little square voids in the mail to
Yep.
allow you to bend your elbow.
Yeah.
It's really useful. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing that's noticeable here, um, let's start from the left. We've got the cote. You can see how the scales are fitted together. They all overlap in the same direction,
Yes.
which is quite normal when you're making lamellar armor.
Mhm.
Now, what the Japanese did is that row of scales, first they have the individual scales. Uh, Normally, the exception is in the Shikoro. Normally, they have 13 holes. So they have
Mhm.
six on one side and seven on the other.
Mhm.
And when you lace them together, they half overlap each other.
That's right.
And the lacing, which normally you would expect the top to go out the back and up, it actually goes out the back of the front scale and up between the two. And that's how they manage to keep all those rows of vertical lacing so perfectly flat because they're trapped. And when these rows are put together, before the scales are laced together horizontally, um, along the bottom, like there's eight holes in two pairs either side of the scale. So they're laced together along the bottom to make a row. Then they get a piece of leather, usually dog leather, uh, and very thin leather, and they glue it over the lacing, and then they lacquer the whole thing to make it waterproof.
Mhm.
And then the lacing, this red lacing that you can see, that's all done after these plates are put together. So they look like they're flexible rows of scales. But when this was made, which I'm thinking is late, it's an early style of armor, but I think it's in such good condition. I think it's 16th, 17th century, probably. Um, those rows are not that flexible. Uh,
Mhm.
that, depending on the thickness of the lacquer, they may have had some flex. You may have been able to bend them a little bit, but they're not loose wobbly bunches of scales. They're actually quite solid.
What
And
kind of leather did they use?
dog skin is the one I saw in a Japanese book. This was a contemporary book from the 1700s. Um, uh, they used deer skin for a lot of other things, um, but for some reason they thought dog skin was better to cover the lacing and when they were lacquering them all together. Because lacquer is like nature's plastic. when you apply it layer by layer, the layers stick to each other and it forms a solid waterproof covering, which is reasonably rigid. Um, it can be broken, of course.
Yes.
And sometimes, unless you have a magnet, they lacquer the scales so well, you cannot tell the difference between metal scales and leather scales. And in some armors, to save weight, they would have a metal scale, leather scale, metal scale, leather scale, metal scale, alternating along the row
Mm.
to reduce the rate by sometimes up to 20%, depending on how thick the leather was. Could be more. Um, the other thing is you can see the traces of how it's fastened together. So the armor fastens together at the right side. Um, some armors fasten together down the middle of the back. Uh, the term you see in Western scholarship for that is haramaki do. Uh, that's technically not correct because haramaki just means belly wrap. So technically, you could even call this that, but they didn't. Well, in Western literature, they don't. Um, it's the connection between the armor is usually at 2 points. There's an actual set of laces up under your arm. You can see them in this middle photograph.
Yeah.
And uh, when you put your sash on, that closed it at the bottom. So it was quite simple. Sometimes the armor, if you undo the shoulders, you can lay it out flat, and the two, the right side from the back and the right side from the front just meet together, and they make a tube out of it. Um, Armor developed over the years. So the earliest armors, the dough was fairly straight sided.
Yes.
So a lot of the weight was on your shoulders.
Yes.
Then later on, they started tapering the dough so you would wear a sash before you put the armor on, and the dough would sit on that.
Yes.
There were all kinds of ways that they tried to make it possible to wear the armor longer without too much fatigue, because this armor is can be heavy.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, According to the old Japanese writings, it gets really heavy when it's wet, uh, which is over the generations they started to reduce the amount of lacing. One, to reduce the number of holes in the armor that the lacing goes through, and two, to reduce the amount of lacing that could absorb water if you get wet when it rains.
Yes.
Um, so it's
These are,
there's a lot of
these are considerations for battlefield, guys. Again, on this channel with Bede, we talked about it a lot. What we do in full contact fighting in this modern, it's not only that we use blunts, but also there are other considerations. For example, you fight in a gym, right? For the covered area, right? You don't go
yeah.
into outside. So these are considerations which are extremely important to take into account, right? All these
Oh
factors.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do see some reenactment groups fighting out in the rain, and I've been there when it's happened, and it's pretty miserable for the guys. I mean, footballers play in the rain with no trouble at all, but they're just wearing jerseys and shorts.
Yeah, yeah, it's
It's
a
just a
different.
matter of going into the dressing room and taking them off and wiping yourself down and putting warm clothes on. When you're wearing armor and padded garments and whatever, and it gets wet and you've got nowhere, you can't change because people are trying
Yeah.
to kill you. It's very miserable. You see this nice padded cord that's used to hold the helmet on. That that way of tying it is purely for displaying the armor. It's not how it's actually worn. I can see he's wearing a mempo,
Yes.
which is the face armor, which is often in two pieces. Like the nose could spring off if you want to be able to breathe better.
Yes.
Um, the mouth is quite open because it's your primary breathing mechanism. Because these masks are lacquered, usually red on the inside. They actually fit on your face.
Yes.
They have no padding or anything. They're meant to sit against your face. And a lot of the design is designed to help hold the helmet on so that the cords for the helmet are tied over the mask. And that mask is there really to uh, help with holding the helmet on. Now, this one you can see that the mouth basically. I'm guessing looking at it
Mhm.
that the nose is detachable. You can just see little protuberances.
Yes.
That's for the cord for tying the helmet on to go
Yeah.
under.
Yeah.
Now, looking at the helmet, there's a number of things that stand out. First of all, the helmet is made in a lot of plates riveted together.
Yeah.
Um, those plates are not flat, they have a ridge on one edge, and
Yes.
that's where you get these ridges from. Now, um, a wealthy person's armor, like this one, could have brass trimming on those ridges or even gold encrusted brass trimmings on it. This is not that unusual.
Mhm.
There's even Tibetan helmets like that. So, the idea of trimming these things is quite a widespread thing. You see, um, the turn back bits, the fukageshi, you can see the undersides of the scales because they are, in theory, uh, the prolongation of the top row of the neck guard. Um, you can see in the photo on the right, if you look really carefully, you can actually see the lacing inside the neck guard,
Yes.
uh, which is
Yeah.
fairly rare to be able to see.
Yeah.
Now you've got these decorative pieces on the armor. The first one, so you've got a brim, which is part of the helmet. It's actually riveted to the helmet. Then you've got this open work piece, which is decorative. Then you've got the big kind of flaring horn-like shape, which slots into a little slot, which you can see the base of running up the center of the helmet there. It has like a spring clip in it. So those really massive horn-like things are very thin pieces of metal. Um, they're not meant to be particularly heavy. They have no defensive purpose. They're just meant to make you stand out. And helmets were major areas of decoration.
And there are
Uh,
inscriptions on it, aren't they? No, they're not.
yeah, does it? Well, I'm not sure if they're inscriptions or they're decorative.
I think they're
See,
decorative bit.
yeah, I think they're decorative too. Um, the other thing I was going to say, you can just see the throat protection there. It's called Nadawa when it's separate, and when it's separate, there's like a metal U-shaped piece that fits around your throat and ties behind it, and then the scales hang off that. But sometimes it's directly attached to the mempo. Um, it has the translation of its name from Japanese, I've been told, is dribble hang because it hangs underneath. There's a little tube at the base of the chin of the mempo, so sweat will run out.
Yes.
Uh, so that thing is directly under that. Um, as I said, the mempo sits right on the face, so it's really quite surprising when you look at it. Now, these are good shots of the
Yes.
helmet in profile.
Yes.
Um, you can see there's a ring on the back, and the uh, that would have been tied in a miniature agamaki bow. Um, there's different explanations for why it was put there. I'm not going to go into those because I don't know whether they are appropriate to this particular armor. But normally that would be tied into that cruciform bow knot. Um, the other thing you can see is that the top row of scales is probably not scales. It's probably just an embossed or lacquer raised piece of metal meant to look like scales. And the next row, which is real scales, uh, you notice it doesn't actually connect to the fukagieshi. Originally, that would have been one piece turned back, but by this stage, they're not fitting them directly together. Um, but they still have the same function. The way the rows, the neck guard is set up is so that when you move your head, it covers you either way. Early neck guards were huge and fairly flat. Um, Gradually, they started to taper down, and by the middle of the Sengoku Jido period in the 1500s, they'd almost got straight. So you see later helmets where the neck guards kind of just they're a bit they flare out a little bit, but nowhere near as much as this. This is an archaic feature that was very popular for a while.
Yeah. Oh.